Today on Belonging in Classrooms, you're going to get to hear part 2 of our conversation with my dear friend, mentor, fellow human in the work, Paula Luxenberg. We're going to continue our conversation where we really challenge segregation, desegregation, integration, talk about all those things. What do schools today really look like in America? And we're going to talk a lot about how parents play a role, what our perception is as parents, what's the difference between a practice and a policy, and why don't we have a country where there is more integration, like true integration? We don't get to all the problems, but we're going to we don't get to all the solutions, but we're going to keep wrestling with the problem today on Belonging in Classrooms. What's coming to mind for me is that, so my kids have been in a what we would call like less resource school.
Yep.
And now I would say the school that they're in now is much more resourced. Mm-hmm. However, the kids of color experience in both buildings is relatively the same. When I think about opportunity and who gets to go, one of the things that I think about is like our district's really broke. One of the things we don't have money for is sports. And so in order for kids to participate in track, you have to provide your own way to get to track meets. And so at my kids' elementary school, we didn't get to go on a lot of field trips we couldn't watch to because we didn't have busing money. And this year, several high school students had to Uber their own way to a track meet while the rest of the sort of fundraising booster machine rolled on, but nobody checked to see if they had a way to get to the meet. And so for them, even that proximity doesn't necessarily fix that. It's the same problem. And I think about all of I got an email today to go to a booster meeting. That doesn't really impact everybody.
Right. And that's a prime example of the difference between desegregation and integration.
Yes.
You know, in a truly integrated environment, the kids who we most push to the margins, we would instead raise up in the center. And build things around them.
And know that means that everybody would learn and have more. It does not mean your kid would have less. I think that concept, that scarcity mindset and fear really drive a lot of parent choice, especially white and underprivileged parent choice. I can speak as one who used to make those decisions based in fear. And so, I think it's important to name kind of the realities. And then let's just talk a little bit about like how hard it is to see things up like this up close.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I want to spend some more time with us, maybe going back and forth, naming some of the realities.
Let's do it.
Because I feel like something I'm trying to challenge myself to do is to be more of a bridge. I'm one of the rare people who has a foot in each different world. And I feel like I am not very skilled or practiced yet at being like a translator or a window between those two worlds. So let's try that. Okay. So one example that I can think of is at the majority white school that my kids used to go to, almost all of the teachers had been there 20, some of them closer to 30 years. They had a lot of expertise. They also had a strong culture that they had built with each other about how the school works.
Grade level teams.
Absolutely. At my kids' current elementary school, not this past school year, but the one before that, a whole entire year went by where there was not a third grade teacher in either of the 2 third grade classrooms. They had a series of long-term and short-term subs and people who were supposed to be filling other roles in the building playing that role, but not one person who was just with them 5 days a week the whole year.
I have an example. Okay. I'm thinking of when my kids were in middle school and there was a group of moms that had some concerns. They went to the school board meeting. These were moms of color. Went to the school board meeting. They were asked to wait till the very end to make their point. They were also asked to meet with the principal in another room. They never got an answer to the question. They were gaslit. Mm-hmm. I'm going to contrast that to a school board meeting I was at in the suburbs last week, mm-hmm. where I watched a group of 12 white moms walk in, take the front row mm-hmm. in unison, mm-hmm. come forward with their data, get the first speaking spot, talk about class sizes just for their kids, and then roll out. And I was like, I'll bet they'll get that change. Yeah. I'll bet they'll get that change. Yeah. Right. And so like that, I think one of the things that I've heard as long as I've been a parent is like that the involved parents get what they want. Yeah. And again, when we talk about that, we're not acknowledging the river that's already moving, because my experience is even if you have some power and some privilege in a system, once you're in relationship and asking for something for the kids that the district bets against, all of a sudden that things just stop working.
That has absolutely been my experience. So another example is, as you know, one of the things that MPS decided to do with some of its COVID money, its ESSER money, was to create these intervention triads mm-hmm. To work in small groups and one-on-one with kids who were testing, I think 2 grade levels below in either reading or math. Mm-hmm. And the way the policy was designed was theoretically intended to be equitable mm-hmm. in the sense that it was for every 75 kids, a school got funding for one intervention triad. And they were called triads because it was one licensed teacher and then 2 assistant educators mm-hmm. who were supposed to work with them. Mm-hmm. And at my kids' school, we were budgeted to have 4 intervention triads.
It's a lot of help.
It's a lot. Would have been fantastic. I was so excited when I saw that because I was like, this is the year that my kids' friends are going to learn how to read. They were 4th graders. Yeah. And I was like, yes, this is the year. This is the year. And instead what happened is there was never going to be enough staffing to actually staff all of the intervention mm-hmm. triads mm-hmm. all over the district. And the way that hiring, both in general and for those positions in particular, worked was that the individual schools had to hire their people. Mm-hmm. And so Bethune did not get any of its intervention triads fully staffed. The licensed teachers who were supposed to be doing it ended up having to teach within the classroom. Yep. Because they weren't able to hire people to replace that. And I want to be clear that one of the reasons they weren't able to, because this is where it's like policy and practice combined or what makes systemic racism. We ended up not having a principal that summer. Yep. And there was no one, it's not anyone's job at the district level to be like, oh, let's take over hiring for this school because the principal who would normally be doing it isn't there right now. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that's just one example. And so then I did use my privilege, my race, class, and like relationship positionality privilege to go speak at a school board meeting in October of that year. Because I'd been kind of waiting for like mm-hmm. someone else to notice, someone else to do it. I really don't like any possibility of me even like having a whiff of white saviorism about me. So it makes me sit on my hands a lot more at this global majority school than I did at the majority white school. Mm-hmm. And even then, we ended up with assistant educators to fill those positions, but still never even a single, like one full-time person who was able to do the licensed educator positions for those 4. Yep. And so the assistant educators never had the mentorship that they needed. They never had the oversight and training and support that they deserved. But the district was like, we fixed it. And the only reason they even did anything is because I, with all of my privilege, said something publicly. And I do that a lot less at my kids' global majority school and on behalf of their global majority school than I did when they were at a majority white school. And a lot of that is because I just know it's not going to matter.
It's not going to matter.
It's not going to matter. Yeah. And for me to see like how quickly that has been something that I have just like that has just sunk in for me. And I'm not facing oppression based, like a lifetime of oppression based on my race or class, or like I have a lifetime of experiences of generally, if I say I want something, like generally I can get it. But I can't when it's on behalf of Black kids.
So my experience with that was, I remember that there were some parents and some educators at a school here. Their playground was far away from their building. And they had a large amount of children who were receiving special education services. And there was also public parking right next to their playground. And they had been asking for a fence. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, I've been going to the school board meetings. I know the names of so-and-so and so-and-so. I'm not going to step into this very often, but I think we can do this. And it was during the Derek Chauvin trial for the murder of George Floyd. And so I remember getting just totally stalled by all of these people in the district that I really respected. By the way, going back to our previous point, many of whom have turned over twice since then.
Yep. None of them are around.
But I remember being like, well, this person is a good person and they'll do this. And I just hit a wall. And everybody kept saying there were so many reasons for no fencing. But what I knew for sure was that a school just 10 minutes down the road had beautiful fencing donated by a family and a rain garden all around it for the children to hop and play magically in. These parents couldn't get that. And we fenced our whole city to prepare for potential violence or outcry in case Derek Chauvin got off. And I just remember every time I would watch them putting up a fence, I would say, there's more fencing. There's more fencing. We can do it to keep the cry of the oppressed out, but we cannot do it for children to play safely. And that was really a moment for me where I was like, oh, even my privilege has an end if I align with people. And that, even just this weekend, I was talking to someone about something and I said, we were struggling to get funding for this program. And she was like, but why? It's a good thing. It's for kids to do a space. And I said, because our country needs to bet against some kids. And you can dress it up in all kinds of reasons, but to pretend that that's not the reality is only about the way you feel comfortable seeing it. It's really painful to see close up.
It's really painful to see close up. It is. I was going to say I understand the impulse to want to look away. I give in to that impulse sometimes to look away. And these are my kids' friends. Like, these are kids that I know, that I adore, that are brilliant, that have sleepovers at my house, that I've seen laugh and eat way too many Takis, and they're just not on a systemic level from America, from Minneapolis public schools, from the city of Minneapolis, from any of us. Like, we're all complicit here. They are not being given what they need and deserve. And we are I was about to say, I agree with you. Like, we're betting against them, but what we're doing as a society is betting that they will be the people who fill our jails. Or who work low-wage jobs
with
that don't
no
require higher education, or who die young. I mean, God, a conversation that my husband have periodically is like, which of these kids do you think is going to be the first to die before they graduate high school? And it's not the kids. Again, kids are brilliant and hilarious and creative and loving and strong, and we just don't give them choices.
And I'm going to say one more thing.
Yeah, do it.
It's also not the parents.
Yeah, it is not the parents.
I think that as long as I've been in spaces like this, two things have been very real to me. One is that white parents, generally speaking, have very little understanding of what it is like to parent a kid of color in this America.
Mm-hmm.
And I can think of an example of that, which was this night I was out to dinner with a group of friends. We all had fifth graders going into sixth grade. And they spent the entire conversation having a conversation about this cell phone pledge that they all wanted us to sign. And I remember just sitting there and looking at the table and being like, my kids have to have a cell phone because they might need to record it's life or death. Yeah. And I realized that we were friends, but they hadn't ever really stepped into our experience. Yeah. They even sent their kids to global majority schools, but there hadn't been an integration of their thinking into the reality. We did not have we shared walls, but we didn't share experiences. And so many times I have heard that it is involvement in PTAs and volunteering that is the thing that makes a good parent in a good school. And I'm just here to say it is not true. If those are all things that you tell yourself to feel better, that is your reality, but that is not the truth. It is not the truth that schools don't have enough resources because their parents aren't involved enough.
Yeah, that's not why.
That's not why.
That's not why. And it's already a really uneven playing field. Mm-hmm. And I will say that the types of fundraising that some PTAs at the whitest schools in this district for sure, and the types of volunteer systems, there's whole systems set up. Mm-hmm. I've been one of those volunteers. I was in my kids' kindergarten class every single week. I've seen it. I've been a part of it. Yep. Is just completely different than what happens in the other more than 50% of the schools in the city. And so, for instance, at my kids' elementary school, the teachers are often spending their own money on snacks and gloves and hats and snow pants, and sleds, and to use at recess. And at the majority white school that my kids used to go to, the PTA just gives teachers a certain amount of money every year to reimburse them for the costs that they know teachers are paying out of their pockets. Mm-hmm. And look, teachers in public schools everywhere are paying for stuff out of their pockets.
And shouldn't be.
And should not be. Yep. Should not be.
Absolutely.
No teacher should have to do that.
I agree.
And when we have systems, up that cover some of those costs for teachers in some schools and not in others, that's basically giving teachers a bonus to work at the whitest and wealthiest schools. When meanwhile, a policy thing, but that's a practice. It's not an official district policy. A district policy that has been talked about at certain times is, should we pay teachers more to work at, the schools that are hardest to staff, which are, the global majority, the ones with high levels of homeless and highly mobile kids. Yeah. And I could argue that one either way. I'm not going to say which is the right thing to do, because there's pros and cons either way. But I am just going to say we actually already have policies and practices in place that 100. Pay teachers at the whitest and wealthiest schools more than teachers at global majority schools.
Okay, so really we're having this long conversation about all of the things that are tough. Yeah. They're tough, right? Yeah. And we don't necessarily think we don't want to end, but one of the things that we have learned in our time of wrestling with these problems together, and we've held each other accountable. Yep. We've had hard conversations with each other. Yep. When do we lean in? When do we step back? Yep. What's our lane? All those things. What we have learned is that sometimes there's just mess on the table. Yeah.
And you gotta just leave it. I think that there's a lot of me that feels like I can't speak up about the challenges that I see or about the differences that I see in these two worlds if I don't have the solutions, if I don't have the ways to fix it. Yeah. And a thing that I have learned through being in a relationship with you and others is the importance of leaving the mess on the table. That sometimes it's just the naming it. It's just the saying it out loud.
Yeah.
And you don't have to like wrap it up in a neat bow or solve it all in one conversation, but sometimes just the saying it gets other people to be like, oh yeah, me too. Or, oh, I saw this other related thing. And then eventually over time, in the words of Miriam Kaba, relationships are the unit of change.
Yes.
And so by moving slowly and with intention and through relationship and centering kids, sometimes some solutions, whether they're on a very micro level or a very macro level or somewhere in between, sometimes they just sort of organically arise. And sometimes they don't.
And sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
And sometimes really, really amazing things just don't work. And sometimes really amazing kids don't get what they need. Lots of times really amazing kids. So if there were some final thoughts that I would want to leave with folks, is I've noticed as we've been talking about this just a very little bit, this is a really intense conversation. It's a wound America has not even begun to deal with. Yep. And I think people have perceptions of where we are that are by the
not
data, by the
reality.
Numbers, literally not real.
Yeah.
And America is set up so that you can look away really easily.
Yeah. That's what segregation does. It's for white people, it is the gift of being able to just literally not see the backs that your privilege rests on, like the literal backs of enslaved people and their descendants, and then also the stolen land that we all reside on. And for people of color, though, the being in a bubble, I think is a way to keep people from seeing too much of the differences, because then they might get angry and actually do something about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I wrestle when it's uncomfortable for me, to know that my kids' friends and their families see the level of wealth that my family has and how much more wealth in terms of money we have than them. It's really uncomfortable for me. And it's because, like, as much as we don't talk about race in this country, we really don't talk about class. And we really don't talk about money. And true. I'm grateful that I am practicing, I am learning to hold that discomfort, to not let it get in the way of relationship, because those kids and their families deserve to see how people outside of their neighborhood live and outside of their family live, and to know that, like, and to ask questions about, like, why is that? And this isn't fair. I mean, my kids' friends have said things like, how did you get to live in such a big house? How much did it cost? All of these things that make me feel deeply uncomfortable and are actually exactly the questions they need to be asking.
Yes. Yeah. I think the other place where I've really leaned into mess on the table is in sharing with other parents of privilege in our school, like sort of bursting their bubbles a little bit, and being okay with their discomfort. Yeah. I have become really skilled at being really okay with discomfort, and knowing that saying it bluntly doesn't make it less true. Right. It's just not a skill we have in our country. Yep. Yeah. Okay, so as we kind of come to a close, and we wanted to say so many more things.
We did. We had so many plans.
We had such a great plan.
We touched on like 10% of them.
We touched on 10%.
Yeah.
One of the things that I really believe is that there is no way forward except for to bring more and more people into relationship with the problem.
Absolutely.
And so if you hear nothing else from this today, please know that there is nothing lacking in the children and I'm going to say, in the beautiful, amazing Black teens
Mm-hmm.
that roll in and out of my house every night.
Mm-hmm.
Except for that, we give them more to hold with not enough.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yeah.
And that is, it makes you uncomfortable as a person who just wants what's right for your kids or what's best for your kids, and you don't ever look up. It is not untrue
Mm-hmm.
that you are part of the river going one way.
Right. And I'm also going to say that I deeply believe that no one is free unless we are all free.
Yes.
I didn't make that up. Many people wiser than me have said those words. And that it can be really hard to swim upriver. It can be hard to look across the river to the other side.
Yes.
And that also, once I've begun to see things, I can't unsee them.
You can't unsee them.
And the amount of beauty that has been brought into my lives, beauty and complexity and relationship and life that has been brought into my life and my family's life through intentionally getting curious and putting ourselves in places where maybe we felt like weren't for us or we didn't belong. And you know what else? Sorry, one last thing. Is that before being in those spaces as a white person, I would have thought they don't want me. I'm not welcome. And you know what it turns out? I have never, ever felt unwelcome as a white person in any majority Black spaces. And I realized that I was projecting.
Yeah.
I was projecting because there are many majority white spaces where a person of color would be made to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. Now, I've had some lessons handed to me pretty hardcore.
Yeah.
And I've learned some ways to show up and cause less harm. But I think sometimes we stay away from these issues because we don't want to hurt or because we don't want to hurt others. And it's also important to name that we are living in a state of hurt.
Yes. Yeah.
And so just being separate
perpetuates the state of hurt.
Perpetuates it.
Yeah.
And so lean in.
Yep.
Learn.
Yep.
Relationship. Share power.
Yes.
Don't, like, nobody wants 10% of your plant sales where you get to hold 90% of the power and the money.
Yeah.
Right? Think about those contexts a little bit and look up.
Yeah.
Look up around you. Look up around you and see.
Yeah. And work on discerning the difference between being uncomfortable and being unsafe.
Yeah. You know, I was reflecting about this. We'll wrap after this about how taking feedback used to gut me.
Yeah.
And now
you help them see when there are ways that they can be a better version of themselves.
Yes.
That criticism can be a love language. Or feedback can be a love language. And I just see you doing that in MPS all the time, but not in a way that's just like a hammer, like I'm just criticizing you all the time, but in a way that's also so loving, that shows up with cupcakes. That really does say truly centered on kids, and just thank you. Thank you for continuing to show up when the system really doesn't want you to.
Nope. It's been fun. We've learned a lot.
And we will continue to.
And we might have to come back and do the part of the conversation we planned.
We might.
Okay, let's end it there.
Okay, that's a good place to end.